So today we are going to talk about the things that I have and have not acquired from the B1 level in Spanish after approximately 1,000 hours of input. So basically I am kind of preparing to take the DELE exam, and I want to take the B2 or C1 exam. But I do have, some time to prepare for it. So most of my Spanish learning after one semester of Spanish several years ago has been kind of through the language acquisition model, the whole Stephen Krashen theory about comprehensible input and learning through understanding. So something that I find very, very interesting is the kind of natural order hypothesis, or just the idea that the order that you acquire things in a language does not necessarily correspond to the order that they are normally taught in, or even necessarily like an intuitive order. And so it has been very interesting as I have been kind of reviewing this material, what things I can tell that I have acquired naturally and what things I absolutely have not, even though they are considered level appropriate. I just thought that this would be really interesting to discuss because I think I haven't really seen videos that talk about this, and it definitely is something that I hear researchers who study language acquisition and talk about it on YouTube talk about how things are acquired in a different order, but I've never really heard anybody specifically talk about what that order is for them, what their experiences were based on what you'd expect to see from classroom learning. So I did use the course Langalia to do B1. Basically, I chose this course because it did kind of closest replicate kind of input approach. I mean, obviously it's a course, so it is trying to teach things, but most of the outright teaching is very, very short. And then there's a lot of reading, listening. So there's a really good chance at you just being like, well, this sounds right. And that's kind of what I tried to go through this course with the mindset of. I try to kind of ignore the grammar sections mostly, and then just fill things out based on what felt right. And then from there, it was very, very obvious what things I had not acquired yet. So I did accidentally leave my notes for this video in my office at work today. So I think I remember the things that I was going to talk about, hopefully. So there were 3 things that stuck out to me majorly that I have not acquired fully yet that would normally be in the B1 level. So in this course, at least, B1 includes the present continuous, so the gerund thing, the 4 types of past tense in the indicative mood, kind of a review and continuing prepositions, indirect object pronouns, comparatives, superlatives, and that's everything, I think. So bear in mind though that I did not test into B1. I tested as a B2 level, so I really should have been either kind of reviewing the B2 course or going on to the C1 course. This was a review course basically for me. I knew that my past tense was very, very weak, and so I specifically looked for the level that covered past tense in order to retake it to, see where my weaknesses were and to get more input about past tense. So when to use specifically the 2 simple past tenses was very difficult for me. The idea that a narration of a past event is in a different tense than, just saying something happened in the past, that aspect is totally lost on me, and they both sound right to me. So that one I definitely have not acquired yet. There were other kind of glitches with past tense. Those kind of evened out for me, the idea of today I went to the store versus yesterday I went to the store being in a different tense. At first I was like, what? But then, that was something where I think learning the rule actually did kind of help me. Again, I think it's something that I will acquire fully on my own later, but that's a distinction in which it would be easy not to ever notice that yourself. But that was something that I that did click after learning that rule, whereas the distinction between the other tenses did not click. And so that is something that I am going to start trying to, just trying to pick more books that are in past tense in an effort to get more of that input and hopefully acquire that. Something else was a, returning issue from, Spanish 1 that everybody runs into, which is ser versus estar. That is something that I hadn't even really thought that I had an issue with, but the thing is, I discovered that once you put them in past tense, I forget again, like not even forget, but it's like they merged into one entity in my brain, and my brain was just like, yeah, I know that means was. And so they're just used interchangeably in my brain, but obviously they're not used interchangeably in Spanish. And so that is another thing that I'm hoping, that I will acquire it, but I have a hard time even remembering which is which once they are conjugated into past tense. So that shows you how much I don't know that at all. And that is something that I have actually heard before as specifically a late acquired thing that is taught early and probably shouldn't be. So that is definitely true for me. Also, very similarly, por and para. Sometimes one of them sounds right, but I would say at least 50% of the time, they both sound right to me, even when they are not. So yeah, that's another one that I think my brain is just, swapping them out interchangeably. I will say I am not a detail-oriented person by nature. Like, I can be. I have had jobs where I needed to be very, very detail-oriented, and I can be, but I find it incredibly infuriating and very boring. And so I do think that is part of where some of these finer things are maybe slipping through the cracks a little bit in my acquisition at this stage, because I am not a person who really processes information on a granular level usually. Okay, so moving on to the things that this course really focused on, so I could tell they thought that you were going to struggle with them, but I did not struggle with them at all. And these were fun things, I think, to discover. And one of them is definitely just irregular forms of verbs. Like, I have virtually no problem with irregular forms. Definitely, potentially producing them. Like, my production is not very strong in general, so that could definitely be an issue. But recognizing them, if I know the verb, I will recognize the irregular form almost all the time, and many times be able to produce it myself. So that's good, obviously, because I am not going to memorize those. So, and definitely, mostly, the object pronouns are solid. Usually, I don't really have to think about it anymore. Like, I don't have to translate, like, me dan un regalo. Like, I don't have to try to translate, like, okay, so the person who gave them the gift was plural, third person, and I received the gift, and try to piece together the different pronouns. I usually just look at the sentence and I just know, Same with prepositions that are not por and para. Usually I knew how to form the prepositional statements. I definitely knew what they all meant, just kind of the structure of how to do that. Usually I was just like, yeah, obviously, it would have things like delante que, delante a, delante de, delante por, and I would be like, this is ridiculous. Why are you asking me this question? But obviously, if I was going through this and trying to learn it from this material without having seen it in the wild, that would not be a ridiculous question whatsoever. So, same with comparatives and superlatives. They all just completely made sense to me. And something that I think could be really hard is tan versus tanto, tantas, you know, those kind of things. That differentiation of when to use tan versus tanto, they sound ridiculous to me wrong now. Like, that's something that is clearly very well assimilated into my brain, which is funny because I don't notice that at all. I don't pay attention to that whatsoever, but it was very obvious in my brain when one was the right one to use. Like, it just was natural. I will be moving on to the B2 course. So if this was interesting, I will make another one at B2 and probably continuing on after that, because I do kind of want to finish all of the CEFR courses on here and probably some other courses as well, but that's not relevant to this conversation. If you have questions about Langalia as a course, this is absolutely not affiliated in any way. I've never talked to them, but this was just what I chose to use as kind of an assessment and a tool for my own studies. So if you have questions about the course, again, I will be making a review. So if you leave those comments below, I will make sure to address them in the review. But yeah, so I look forward to your comments, and I will see you in the next video.